Mustafa, are you ready for some questions?
I am.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it, actually.
Okay, good. I have Kevin. Kevin has a question. He wants to know, when should pursuit of cultural transformation be abandoned in an organization? And he says, for example, management's on board, processes are identified for improvement, but there's no progress.
So, Kevin, if I understand the question, is when do you abandon cultural change?
Yes. He's saying when management's on board, processes are identified for improvement, but there's no progress.
Yeah, well, if you have everybody on board and you identify the process and you have no progress, which means that your initiative is failing. I hope I understand the question correctly. If that's the case, one of the reasons why it's probably no progress is because the culture is just not there. And if that's the case, I don't know if abandoned is the right word, but maybe a restart or a reset is probably more appropriate, right? Or it could just be that you guys have picked the wrong domain or the wrong technology to begin with, and maybe that is where the problem is. So there's lots of things in which why you can have people on board and you have identified processes, and if there's no change, it just could be a culture, could be a culprit, or a culprit just could be that you're focusing on the wrong area, or that you just don't have people on board, or you don't have the right buy-in. So I don't know, Kevin, if I've done justice to your question. I would love to learn more so I can actually give you a better answer.
I mean, I think you're definitely answering the question that he's asking, and I think you're right. You know, abandon is not really the right thing to do with it, right? Just kind of regroup, and just start.
I think a reset is probably where I would focus on first. Okay, and I would reset and actually go back to the rules of the road and make sure that you are actually following some of those things when you do the reset.
Great, thank you. Now, this next question, I've asked for a little bit of clarification on it, and I'm not clear on the question, so if you need more information, just ask, okay?
Yep.
So this question came up when you had the first slide up right in the very beginning, one of your first slides that had the transitional IT on one side and DevOps on the other side?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where this question came from, and it's from Himanshu, and they're asking, how about, I'm going to give you a couple of different things that he said. How about on hardcore engineering programs and not a traditional IT program? What is your take on when the program switched from traditional / semi-waterfall to full DevOps Agile?
So those dimensions that I talked about still apply for both engineering as well as application development practices. A lot of the transition that's going on in the industry right now is all about software development, and you can call it application development, you can call it engineering, you can call it hardcore, I'm not sure, but at the end of the day, if it is taking a long time for your company to release a product. Now, the good thing about engineering is, and I'm making this big assumption, that it's already a product-focused team. But if it's taking a long time for you to release your product or bring it to market, then many of the things that we talked about here today will apply to you as well.
Okay, thank you. Yes, he said you were answering it. You were answering his question. He chatted back in again.
Perfect.
And Jill is asking, do you see a correlation between DevOps and ITIL? Example, problem management with the DevOps process?
Yeah, I think, Jill, that's a fantastic question. And I get this question all the time, is where does ITIL fit into DevOps? And I actually think that there's a huge synergy between DevOps and ITIL. At the end, when I think about ITIL, or when you think about ITIL, there are certain steps that you have to take in order for you to ensure the right quality of that process. Those steps still remain in DevOps. So you might not call them ITIL, but you still have to do that. The question is just how you do it, and at what frequency and at what speed. So I don't think that you actually throw away ITIL. You actually take the key steps and try to figure out what are the right ways to configure it, reconfigure it, automate it, maybe eliminate a few things here and there, but not throw ITIL away, right? So change management is a perfect example. You still have to kind of go through a change management, but maybe you change the definition and say, you know what, certain things are automatic changes and certain things will still require an approval. Same thing with ITIL when you have environment requisition processes, right? And maybe it is not the way that we've had in which, you have a requisition, you kind of put it through a ticketing system, you kind of meet next week, you approve, make sure that you have the right budget and make sure you have the right hardware. And so those processes, you still have to make sure that there's budget. You still have to make sure that the hardware is available. It's just that you might automate that entire thing so that the ITIL is still there, but it's in the background. Right? But I don't think that you can abandon ITIL when it comes to DevOps. It's just a matter of it changes. And in many cases, it becomes the rules engines at the back end if you are going to a self-service model. I hope that answers that, Joe.
Yes. Thank you. We have a question from David, and David is asking, with autonomous teams, how do you include cross-functional team members such as security, database, operations, whose efforts take only a third of the time of the developers? These others may resist being involved, and because it's a waste of their time. Any suggestions for him on that?
I think that's a great question. I think, David, unfortunately, it really depends on the way you have actually defined the product or service in the organization. So even though they might take only a third of your time for yours, you can actually kind of share them with maybe 2 other product teams and make up a full time. So they can be floaters, but they can be floaters within a product. So if you have, I'm going to give you a wild example, right? If you have one product that has 3 autonomous teams, then you can share that one person across those 3 teams. But it's one product, and so the focus is still there. So the focus is going to be, I have a web product, and I have three agile teams, or scrum teams, or squads, or whatever you want to call it, and so I'm going to share that one resource across 3 teams. That's a good idea. Now, what the bad idea is if you have one SME that's shared across multiple different products. So you'll have, I'm going to a third of my time on web, a third of my time in mobile, and a third of my time in mainframe. That's a horrible idea, because that kind of goes back to waiting for resources or having different masters and so on and so forth. So you can still have autonomous teams and sharing of resources as long as they're self-contained within the larger unit. Maybe not at the subunit of the autonomous teams, but maybe the larger product unit. I hope that helps.
We'll see if he chats back in. He said yes, that helps. Thank you, David.
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay, now Rajan has a couple of questions. So his first question is, do we have any standard DevOps assessment approach?
There are a ton of DevOps assessment approaches. I'll give you 3. The first thing is maturity mapping. There's a lot of things that you can find on the web. Before IBM has it, our competitors have it, in which they kind of assess you from 1 to 5 where your maturity is in different phases. Second assessment is there's always surveys that you can actually do. So one of the companies I really like is by the name of Dora, which actually publishes the Puppet Report, and they actually have a sister company in which they will actually send out surveys across the entire team to do an assessment across, I think, 10 or 11 dimensions. And the third one, which is by far my favorite, if you haven't noticed already, is to do a value stream. And a value stream is a good way to assess where you are in your DevOps transformation. Value stream really is a diagnostic tool of anything else, and it's a way for you to identify opportunities.
Rajan said thank you.
Yes. Perfect.
Yep, said thank you.
By the
And
way,
then,
this concept of quick feedback rule, we're seeing it right now live in action. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
yes, it's great. And then the other question was, is there any other KPI apart from time to measure the DevOps success?
So time is going to force you to actually look at both cost and quality. And what's going to help you is, first of all, you can't cheat time, which is why it becomes such a tough master. So if you lose a minute, you lose a minute. You can't say, well, I've allocated to a different group, or I've split it into this and that, which is what we do with our budgets, right? So time is important, but time forces you then to look at quality. And the reason for that is, anything that you do twice is a waste of time. So, and that goes directly to quality and rework, right? So if you write code once, it comes back with a lot of defects. That's a rework of writing code, and that's a waste. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you write code, get quick, on-the-spot feedback of where the defects are, not wait around, so you can fix it and move forward. So time is going to force you on quality. The other piece is also going to force you on is, by definition, cost, right? Because now if you're collapsing silos and because you don't have so many handoffs, more and more people can be doing what I would call value-added work as opposed to just moving paper from one end to another. So, and by the way, when it comes to time, there's different types of metrics. The 2 or 3 metrics that I kind of look at is cycle time, right? Mean time to recover, waste time versus value time. So you can go deeper into time as well, but I like to keep things simple, right? People understand that takes me 7 days to do this. It's now going to take me 4 days, and that is how I'm going to measure my progress. I hope that helps.
Yes, Rajan said thanks a lot for that. Okay, we have a question from Kumar, and Kumar is asking, how can we implement DevOps practice in case of big ERP projects, which typically follow waterfall models?
Yeah. Very good question. Actually, ERP, when it comes to SAP especially, the first question I would ask is, why? I know this sounds weird, but why do you want to speed up that application? And more importantly, if you speed it up, what is the business benefit? Listen, speeding things up for the heck of speeding things up doesn't really make sense. Right? It's the reason why I said in the slides is picking the right application is key as a leader. And when I go into organizations, I usually do a quick. By the way, I get this question all the time, and I say, you know what? Think about. I have something called a post office test. And I say, I live in San Francisco. Let's say if I want to ship a package to New York, I go to the post office. I have 2 options. I can pay less than $1, and the package will be delivered to my friend in New York in about 2 or 3 weeks. Or I can FedEx it, and it's going to cost me about $40, $45, and it'll be delivered overnight. How valuable is that package to me? Do I care about speed, or do I not care about speed? And so every time you pick an application, you have to kind of go through that post office test. And inherently, in most organizations, we have a gut feeling about which applications are worth $40 and which applications are worth $1. So my first question to you when you do ERP is you seriously get into the question is why? Am I going to get benefit out of this or not? In many cases, ERP actually speeding things up actually makes things worse for the organization. ERP is a backbone of your company. It's where you do your financials. You don't want to mess that up by introducing too many changes too fast. But then again, if you use ERP for supply chain, maybe making changes does make sense on a fast pace. So you have to kind of go through that analysis first, and then you start thinking about how I can use some of the practices. And let's say that if you do want to speed up ERP, then some of the other challenges you have, especially with SAP, is you already have some automation built in. I'm sorry, it's not a challenge. Some of it is already there. I mean, the transport path in SAP works really well. So then you can start focusing on the other piece. Maybe you focus on process and organization. And the challenge with ERP is always going to be the infrastructure piece because it's such a tightly coupled package application. So there's lots of things that you can do with ERP, but the first thing I would start with is the question is why we want to do it.
Thank you, Mustafa. He also added, how can we be successful in hybrid models where we have some projects following waterfall while some are agile? With hybrid models, where the challenge comes in is the integration or the dependencies. And if that's the case, then you have multiple things, right? You can say one of the ways to get rid of the dependencies is maybe have some type of an API between the two, right? Between the two applications. Because you have two applications that are running at two different speeds. And so you always have to worry about you either waiting for something or one application is ahead of the other. So maybe you kind of decouple the two is one option. And that usually works quite well because now you've created autonomous products and then they can go at speed that makes sense. Or you can start to say that maybe if the dependencies between the two are really great, then maybe you start going to the small batch mode cycles and say, how can we deliver MVPs for both of them at the same time? But that's a very tough question. It kind of, usually you have to start thinking about how you architected your environment and how you can allow decoupling to happen even if that's possible. He said thank you for that. I have one more question for you right now. So if anybody else out in our audience today has a question that they want to have Mustafa answer for you, please chat it in now for us. And we have a question from Stephen. Hi, Steve. It's good to see you here. How does IT for IT contrast with DevOps?
IT for IT contrasts with DevOps. Well, it kind of goes back to what I earlier said, right? We are IT is in this precarious moment in which IT managers manage IT who focus on IT KPIs. And DevOps, Lean, Agile, Cloud, all of those things are really focusing or pushing IT to become more or allowing them to become more, such as business managers who know IT to impact business metrics. And so if you if you saw one of the first few slides I had, there's a big difference between traditional IT, just for IT, versus DevOps. Right? DevOps is really not for IT. DevOps is really there for the business. It makes a lot of changes in IT. By the way, DevOps, don't get me wrong, makes a lot of changes to the business too. By going to this autonomous model, you might actually be pulling business folks into the model to help you create the MVPs and figure out what is user-centric design and bring that business knowledge. And you're going to force business to start thinking in small batch size. You're going to force the business to think about experimentation as opposed to giving you a long list of features and saying, well, deliver this as fast as you can. So DevOps is actually not really for IT. DevOps is really about business impact.
Rajan commented and he said, I think IT for IT complements the DevOps, not contrasts.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you right now, Mustafa. That was a lot of questions.
That's good.
Yes, it was. Thank you all.
I didn't put anybody to sleep, which is always a good thing.
Yes. I mean, that's really an exceptional amount of questions, actually. So, congratulations, you got them thinking. And thank you all for for joining us with that, with all those questions and submitting them. That was a good conversation. Yeah, Razan said it was a really great session. So we get a lot of compliments now for you. Thank you. Great.
Excellent.
Lots
Thank you,
of
guys.
great
I
information.
appreciate it.
Yeah, so you're getting a lot of accolades here. Well, that's all the time that we have this morning. So again,
can I ask one? Can I just add one more thing, please?
Absolutely.
I have my contact information there. You can always get in touch with me if you want. You can go to my LinkedIn profile and you can connect with me as well. I'd appreciate that. I love it when people do that, especially after a webinar. And I also send out a monthly newsletter on what I call Digital Top 5. And that is basically the top 5 tactics, strategies, articles, whatever you want to call it, on how to actually transform the organization from both a DevOps, cloud, agile, digital perspective. So if you're interested in getting that, shoot me a note or connect me with my LinkedIn and just let me know that you're interested, and then I'll add you to the mailing list.
Oh, great.
It would be a great way for us to stay connected. So if you find things what we said today of value, hopefully you'll find the newsletter of value as well.
Yes, thank you. Oh, Donna's on here. Donna Knapp's on here. Mustafa, she said, awesome job, Mustafa. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Donna.
And Richard said, thank you for the information in today's webinar as well. Yeah, so you've got some new fans, just going to say.